Juices You, where we explore what energizes leaders and how that energy fuels performance, connection, and growth. I'm Brady Wilson from Juice Inc. In each episode, I sit down with leaders and we talk about what fuels them, what sustains them, and the lessons they've learned that are helpful for all of us. Today, I am super excited to have Mr. Pete Bombaci with me. He is the leader of an organization called GenWell, established in 2016. We're going to get into that organization and get Pete to tell us about it, how it started. Pete, welcome.
Thank you, Brady. Great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to get connected.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with a question that I have literally been asking leaders for about 20 years, and that is what juices you, but I'm going to put a very specific kind of a slant on that. When it comes to that drive and mission and purpose of connection in the world, and perhaps in Canada specifically, what is it that sustains you? Because that's tough work. You don't have to, when you wake up in the morning, you don't have to feel that it fuels you. So what is it about this that is sustaining for you, fueling for you? What juices you, Pete Bombaci?
Yeah, thanks, Brady. And I spoke at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario on this past Sunday,
Okay.
and a lady called me up after the presentation, and she said, "Thank you." She had actually seen me at a previous presentation I made, and she was at the conference, and she said, "I just need to let you know that you changed my life." And I was like, "What? How did that, happen?" She went on to tell me the story that she was going through and how she felt disconnected, and she was in some conflict in her life, and what she realized that she needed was to reach out to other people who supported her, who she knew were her supportive community. And so that's what juices me, that's what sustains me, Brady, is actually knowing that we are changing people's lives every day. A couple people came up after the presentation and told me about scenarios they were in and what would I do, and they walked away feeling like, oh my God, it's the simple things. We sometimes complicate the solutions to some of the challenges when, hey, maybe we just go and have a coffee with that person. And for some people, it's rocket science, but for other people, it's just a wake up call to go, wow, you're right. Human connection really is the foundation of, happiness, health, longevity, and a better society.
What's really interesting for me in this, Pete, is I talk to leaders who have got pretty, highfalutin ambitions around changing the world. And, we will salute every one of those leaders in the change that they want to make. Often we can find that for the regular person, trying to change the world is a little paralyzing. And so we like to talk about just make your difference. Just bring your unique contribution. What are you wired to do? And what I'm hearing for you is, yes, you want to see a shift in how we connect in our country and in the world, but the stories you're pointing to are very, very much those human beings that you could actually say, yeah, they live in this town, and I've looked her straight in the eye. And so at the very, very human and one-on-one micro level, that's one of the things that's really juicing you in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you, when I started off, I had many, experts from marketing agencies to certainly some professors in, marketing, communications, branding. I can't even remember what the other areas of subjects that they were studying. But a lot of people said you can't take a holistic approach to this. You need to pick a lane. You should be about seniors, or you should be about young people, or you should be about
Yeah.
and I think the real wake up call in this whole conversation was to say, I know that that's the traditional approach. I know that what we normally do is blame the individual who's suffering and say it's your job to get better, to be, better, more social. Buck up, come on, pal, get back out there. And my approach from day one, Brady, was really saying, look, the solution to our disconnected world and to those who are suffering because they feel chronically or persistently lonely is not telling them that they need to be more social. It's waking up the rest of society, not only to be part of their solution, but also to prevent them from ever getting to this, because people on this. And so we really are starting from ground zero to educate 41 million Canadians across this country.
I love that. And I was listening to some of your work, commenting on Jonathan Haidt's work, and saying the first person who has to put down their phone, it's like that's a big lose. Nobody's going to do that, and no parent is going to stand behind that. And so in this kind of a thing, one, it's kind of counterintuitive because a lot of the work we do in terms of human transformation is just get to the individual. And in this one, we're saying, no, we actually have to create broad scale societal interventions that will have a school, for instance, saying, no, until the age of 16, no social. And that's really the only way we can get at this thing, because the level of pressure that first parent and that first child feels is just insurmountable.
Yeah, I think Jonathan's Heights work for me was the game changer that really helped give clarity on just how negative an impact digital technology was having. And let's recognize it's not just the kids;
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
everybody. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one thing I'd say. But also, Gabor Mate, psychologist, psychotherapist from
Yep.
Vancouver, he
Yep.
said I saw him speak a couple of months ago, but on one of his reels, I captured. He was saying, look, what we've done for 50 years is we've tried to fix individuals and put them back out into a broken society. And I think what we're trying to do at GenWell is we're trying to fix the society so that if you are struggling, or if you are suffering, or even if you're just getting by and you're not struggling today, but if we can create the more supportive relationships, communities, workplaces, classrooms, everywhere we go, if people say, "Hey, how you doing, Brady? How things going?" Top of the morning to you, whatever it is that you like to say, if we can create that type of connection, that type of social health, as we like to refer to it, everywhere we go, we'll create a society where people feel seen, valued, and heard, and all the benefits that come from that.
Love it. We deal with leaders in the workplace. That's kind of our jam. And one of the things I was just saying to a CEO yesterday, Pete, was in the aftermath of COVID, you would think that by now we've got hybrid figured out, yes? We find that there are so many organizations that are struggling mightily with figuring out how to do a meaningful hybrid experience. And there's one employee saying, I want more of those accidental collisions where I run into somebody and then a very beautiful collaborative solution comes out of that. And then there's the other person who's going, I just want to hunker down and get stuff done at home. And I don't want to have to go through the commute and everything. And so, of course, we need hybrid, but the way that organizations are doing it is not necessarily creating the types of connections that I think they would hope for. And so as we're talking about those societal interventions where we're not just asking one person to do something, what have you seen, Pete, just in the realm of hybrid done well, that other organizations might look at and go, oh, well, we can pay attention to that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brady. I'm not even sure I've seen it done. Well, it certainly hasn't been done to perfection yet. And I
No.
think the unique thing about human connection is that people change
Yeah.
and people evolve, stage of life, challenges that we face. So what even might be perfect today may not be perfect tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so I think the most important thing, sorry, I become a little painful with this, is all about building connection. So if we can actually create the occasions that help people understand each other, where I get an opportunity to spend some time with you, know what makes you tick,
Yeah.
and help you thrive as a human being, then that's how we build that sense of safety, psychological safety, trust, all the things that help people thrive as an employee. Because I know when people look out for me, then I look out for them. I'll run through a wall for the people that
Yep.
care about me.
Yep.
And so I think, the starting point for us at GenWell and all the workplace work that we're doing is recognizing that we've never educated leaders or employees about this information.
Yeah.
So we walk around every day looking, how often do we hear, I'm not here for friends. I'm just here to get the job done. Well, our research in Canada suggests that our relationships with our colleagues, the combined benefit of increased happiness and reduced loneliness can be greater with our colleagues than it is with our own family
I
and
believe that.
friends.
I believe that.
And isn't that interesting? And a
Hmm.
lot of people think, well, how is that possible? Well, oftentimes we take our family and friends for granted, so that's a
One.
whole different
That's one
story.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but when we spend 8 to 10 hours working in a job, toiling away at whatever we love to do, hopefully we love what we do. The reality is those relationships with we have with the people who help us get that job done become really important.
Yep.
When we think about, the speed of information, when we think about reduced absenteeism, when we think about leaning in for innovation or collaboration, when I like you, when I know you, I look forward to coming to those meetings. And I think this is the baseline that we need to start with is recognizing that most employees and CEOs and HR directors don't know how important human connection is. And so it feels like we're pushing water up a hill trying to induce and incent people back into an office instead of actually informing them and empowering them with the information that says, hey, I don't need to force you back. You need to understand why you should come back
Sure.
because it's actually about you.
Yeah. This might be information that you probably know it already, but we did some research, it's over 1,000 people so far, around what juices you. And so we talk about 5 driving needs. So belonging, security, freedom, significance, and meaning. Underneath the belonging, one of the top ones is quality connections. So there are 25 things that people get to choose from, and they choose their deal breakers. Now, you can imagine what deal break, but I will not and I cannot do without it. Those people who choose quality connections as their deal breaker are most immune from depletion. So, in our research, only 2.8% of those who say quality connections is the most important thing are experiencing depletion, whereas all the other deal breakers, and stuff like productivity and results, making a difference, the average level of depletion for them is 18%. So it feels to me like quality connections is one of those things that is both the ailment, if you will, and the medication. It's the medicine as well.
Yeah.
There's something that is highly powerful in that very need that allows us to get the need met. So I wonder if you could talk about that from your own experience, if that rings true for you, number one, and if so, what would you bring to that?
Yeah, well, hey, I'm not surprised. So Dr. Kip Ricard, who's the chair of our scientific advisory panel, did a study, and I think the correlation between loneliness and burnout is 98% of people who are chronically or who have burnout are lonely.
Yeah.
And so, it's not a surprise that when we feel isolated from others, when we don't feel like we can reach out for help, whether that's a problem inside or outside the workplace, we start to feel even more isolated. We pull back and we start to just go into this negative spiral. Again, I think a lot of this comes from a lack of knowledge because we've probably never thought about the connections that we have in our workplace making us feel happier and healthier.
Yeah.
I can tell you my own experiences when I look back at my career and I spent some time in the beverage alcohol industry,
Okay.
the place where I felt like I was, and I, funny enough, just had coffee, had breakfast with an old colleague the other day. And he was one of the 3 guys that I worked with on a team where we were so connected. We could finish our sentences because we were so aligned on what
Yeah.
our mission, our vision, and what we were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And every day I look forward, and frankly, I've been very fortunate. I've looked forward to what I do many days of my career. But there was just something special in this group,
Yeah.
and it was all inspired by leaders above us who were constantly saying, "Hey, we're going to go have a beer. Hey, we're going to have coffee. Let's go for lunch. Let's make that time outside of the work
Yeah.
to build our connections as human beings."
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, Once again, research that you would know, but we've looked at like 9 substantive pieces of research that say connection, uh, deep personal relationship is a greater predictor of your physical health than whether you exercise, the quality of your diet, and whether you smoke. It's like it is truly a health superpower. So I'm so thrilled that you are taking this out. I've got a really weird question for you.
Go for it.
Yeah. So as it relates to virtual, and I know that you're not, number one, a Luddite. Number two, you're not saying let's get rid of virtual. You are trying to push people towards let's activate face to face and personal human connect for sure. But there's nothing in you and your work that's saying let's get rid of these Zoom conversations at all. But one of the things that I struggle with, and I haven't really had anybody who's been able to tell me the best, is as I look at you now, Pete, I look at three things. I look at my face, I look at the green light, and I look at your face. So right now, when I'm looking at the green light, for you, I think that would be like I'm looking in your eyes. But if I want the benefit of seeing your facial expressions, I'm now looking at you and not in the
Yeah,
green light,
totally.
and it
Yeah,
probably feels to you like I'm not looking in your eyes.
yeah,
And if I look at myself, well, that's just a devolving spiral of self-consciousness, which doesn't help anybody. So,
yeah.
what do you know about this, and maybe what's your experience? And have you run into anybody who's got some best practices around how do we just be our best selves in this environment?
Well, again, Brady, I feel like we could have a 4 hour conversation on all the things that you're touching on here. So, first off, we are not an anti-technology campaign. We're pro-human connection, and really, it is about helping people understand what are the benefits of human connection versus virtual. So, there was a study
Right.
that came out at the end of the global pandemic that showed that face-to-face interactions have 9 times the brain activity as a digital connection. So this is a wonderful supplement to human interactions, but it doesn't replace the 80 to 90% of nonverbal communication that comes when you and I are sitting in a room, breaking bread, having a coffee, high-fiving on our way out the door,
Yeah.
and really engaging. And I think again, I go back to the whole idea of knowledge. These are not things that were ever discussed. These are not part of any curriculum. I mean, business school, law school, medical school, these are just not things that were ever taught. So we're at a point now where we're having to actually educate people so that they can, again, I don't need to tell you that you should exercise 20 to 30 minutes a day because for 50 years, you've had that beaten into you.
Right.
We have to understand when we think about the way people change behavior, the starting point is I need to actually understand what it is you're telling me about. Then I need to consider it.
Yeah.
Then I need to try it. Then I can see if it works or not. If it works, maybe I try it again. Then I start to believe in it. Then I action it. Then I incorporate it into my, like, there is such a process that we need to take humanity through because unless you grew up in a family where human connection was part of your daily lives. We always sat down for dinner. I just heard a stat the other day. Listen to this, Brady. The average meal time today in Western society is now 12 minutes. And
Oh,
they were
wow.
comparing that to the Mennonite community, I think it was, who their meals are 90 minutes.
Wow.
And you start to realize, again, some cultures, value the connection because I don't know if they know the science or they just recognize that this is how they make people feel happier, healthier, more connected, more seen, more valued, inclusion, belonging. Because again, our belief at GenWell is about human connection. Belonging is something that comes from it. So does mattering. So does community. So does inclusion. So does psychological safety. So does trust. And what we really wanted to do when we built this movement was we wanted to give people what is the action I want you to take, not what am I trying to create,
Right.
not what feeling I'm trying to create, but actually what's the action? Because if we keep taking the action, those feelings and everything else will come.
Yeah, for sure. I love the whole 12 minutes, 90 minutes thing. And I think one thing that I want to just probe into a little bit about, I don't hear you saying, let's go back to what it was like in the 50s and 60s. Now, I may be wrong about this, but if I characterize life in the 50s and 60s in a lot of Canadian families, there was a profound lack of connection. We had really substantive, systemic injustices against women and men who were basically, sitting in the easy chair, smoking their pipe and reading the news. And there wasn't that level of connection around the table because children are seen and not heard. And so we're not trying to go back to that, I don't think. I think we're talking about something that is more highly evolved and more highly actualized. Could you just speak about that, Pete, in terms of not longing for the days? Maybe that you are, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, Brady. I don't think I've addressed that question before, but here's what I would say to it,
Yeah,
and I hope it answers the question. Is There's no question, when my dad came home every day at, no, it was probably 7 o'clock before he
yeah,
got home, there was work life balance every day because there was no phone. The phone never rang
yeah,
with more emails or more follow up calls, and nobody was texting or
yeah,
WhatsApping them. So work life balance back then came almost on a daily basis. You had the time to decompress. Remember when we actually had closed Sunday shopping and people used to connect on their front doorsteps and all those things?
hmm,
So, obviously we've evolved, and certainly the gender roles are certainly far more complex today and certainly more equal. I'm not sure if they're quite where,
right,
some groups would like them to be. But at the end of the day, our message and our mission at GenWell is to awaken people to all the ways in which they can build connection in their lives. Frankly, I often say I don't actually care how you connect or with how many people. I just care that you connect.
yeah,
So, for example, we talk about talking to strangers. We've told people in this country not to talk to strangers for 50 years,
right,
and yet the research shows that those who talk to strangers are up to 3 times happier, and that it increases happiness, optimism, trust, sense of inclusion, belonging, community, just about every measurement that people want in the world today. And we've told people not to do it for 50 years.
wow,
Knowing your neighbor reduces your likelihood of being lonely by up to 3 times. Building relationships with your colleagues increases happiness, increases trust, increases collaboration, innovation, engagement, all the measures that business leaders want.
yeah,
Think about young people in the classroom. How do we get them to take out the pods, put down the phone, and invest that time? You were talking about Jonathan Haidt off the top.
yeah,
So for us, Brady, our message is, hey, now that you understand how important human connection is, we want to make you aware of all the ways in which you can build connection. Volunteering, be a part of your community, get to know your neighbors up the street and down the street. Because if we can awaken people to all the ways in which they can build connection, then our goal is to have you choose.
yeah.
Which one makes you feel more comfortable today? Do you need to build more deep, meaningful relationships with your friends and family? Or is it really about saying hi to more people on the street as you get on the subway or when you're walking to the grocery store? All of these things add value to our lives. And I think our goal is really just to say, hey, look around you. And whether you're doing it because you need it or maybe because you want to help somebody else feel a little more connected today, the power of social health is everybody wins when we do it.
Totally. There was a point in my life where I thought, in terms of moving toward pleasure and moving away from pain, that probably like 50% of us do one and 50. And I was talking to a psychologist and they said, Brady, you're dreaming because only 10% of humanity moves toward a goal and 90% moves away from pain. What
Mm,
started you off was pain, 2003, the blackout. And so there was an impetus of actually, okay, we're getting bored inside of our house. Let's go out into the streets. And that crisis turned into something amazing that I think I certainly remember. And I'll bet you there are a lot of people who are listening today who will remember that. We can't necessarily impinge such a crisis on people today. And you're doing a good job of helping people understand here's the pleasure side, move toward it. And I think there is a message around, yeah, loneliness and burnout. They're like that, and a lot of other things. So there's some watch outs. But I'm just wondering if there are sometimes what leaders do very, very well is they actually create a crisis. I mean, when you and I were raised, Pete, we weren't wearing seatbelts,
mm,
and people were smoking in restaurants and in planes. What we saw with COVID was you can actually change the behavior of an entire world in the space of 72 hours or whatever. It's unbelievable, but it's because there were crises. And
mm.
so one of my questions for you is, in service of what you're doing, there's a massive body of evidence around move toward this beautiful thing. And there's some evidence around we've got to move away from this. Are there crises that you are pointing to that help people go, I got to wear my seatbelt? I got to stop smoking, right? Or in whatever that means in the world of connection.
Yeah, I think I understand your question. And so, when we do our workshops, when we go and speak at conferences, one of the most important things I love to do is highlight what are the negative consequences of being chronically or persistently lonely or disconnected from others.
Yeah,
And then I highlight the positives. So if I
yeah,
touch on the negatives, increases your risk of anxiety and depression, heart disease, dementia, diabetes, suicide, addiction, obesity, cancer. Because when we feel chronically or persistently lonely or disconnected from others, it can increase inflammation in the body.
yeah,
That leads to almost all illnesses. But also, when
yeah,
we feel lonely and isolated, we can get in here and we can start making decisions that aren't really good for us, whether that's addictive behaviors, whether that's aggressive behaviors, things that could actually lead to us doing or taking actions that could harm us, could harm others, many things that can happen. So I oftentimes even think that maybe, Brady, we only think about the individual impact, but when we talk about political polarization and incivility and aggressive extremism, there's lots of research that shows that these are also the impacts of disconnected societies or people, is that we seek a community somewhere in our lives. I happen to know a former biker gang, a member who said, that's why I ended up in the biker gang,
yeah,
because I couldn't find connection and community anywhere else. And so there's the negative side. And then we always highlight, you probably know the Harvard study, 80 years in the
yeah,
making, single greatest contributor to happiness in our lives is the social connections and
yeah,
bonds we have.
yeah,
It reduces anxiety and depression, increases empathy, compassion, and resilience, something we could use more of in the world today, strengthens our immune system, strengthens our self confidence, is a great way to prevent or treat anxiety. And there was even a study at the end of the global pandemic at Massachusetts General Hospital that says it's the single greatest preventative action we can take to avoid depression. And, so which one of those things are you trying to avoid? If there's only one, pick one. But when you see that long list of negatives and all the positives that can come, I don't think you need to hear all of them. Pick one of them. Would you like to be happier? Would you like to be healthier? Would you like to live longer? Which one is it? You know, because there's 100 reasons why we should all be saying hello to our neighbor and talking to strangers and building relationships at the office. But again, I will go back to the most fundamental aspect of behavior change. Simon Sinek always said, tell them the why.
yeah,
If you don't know the why, then I can't get you to engage in this because you probably don't even think that I'm, making sense on your end.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and for business leaders who are listening to this, the why of connection is powerful. Both the crisis if we don't achieve it, and what can be achieved in terms of innovation, and you're talking about keeping your best talent. We talk about organic growth. We talk about the customer experience. You can just go on and on and on. Where the thing that is the common element is connection.
Yeah, and I have a couple of things I'll just throw out there, Brady.
Yeah.
On the internal front, when I was in the corporate world, I would say that most of my bosses, and I had some great ones, that this probably didn't hold true, but we've always thought about the employee between 9 and 5 because I could see them sitting in their seat. So as long as you showed up in the seat, as long as you were there till 5 o'clock, I could look over and I could go, "Yep, Brady's still there. I guess Brady's doing okay because he got here today. He put on clothes and he showed up."
Yeah.
Well, today, because we don't see our employees on a regular basis, we can't do that gut check. Well, Brady, I haven't seen him. I haven't talked to him. So what we need to, I actually believe that leadership today is more about coaching and really about investing in that person as a holistic human being. Because if I can actually help you thrive as a human being, then you'll run through the wall for me. but that's a different type of psychology versus the way we used to manage people. And I think many CEOs are struggling with that transition. I think you've touched on it even in the introduction. It's like most of us were not trained to be going around high-fiving and fist pumping our staff. It was more, hey, Brady, did you get that job done by 2 o'clock that I asked you to get done? And, again, it's kind of the inputs versus the outputs. We were always focused on the outputs, and now we might need to be focused a little more on the outputs and the inputs, because the outputs will come. And then if I can just quickly, Brady, jumping to the external piece,
Yeah.
for 100 years, we've known that people do business with people that they know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
We know that a face-to-face interaction is it 30, I think it's 35% more likelihood of driving a positive outcome in a business relationship. We need to spend time with people face to face. Just your hand, give you a hug, and on the way out the door, go, I got this, Brady. We're good to go. And that's how we build relationships, not by sending another 100 emails and hoping that Brady will, respond to one. It really is about building that connection where there's a sense of trust in everything we do.
Love it. I can imagine there are introverts listening to this today saying, Pete's a pretty big extrovert, and I can see why this fires him up, and I can see how he can see all the other extroverts in the world buying what he's selling. Not me, though. Uh, Pete, how does one allow this to feel accessible to the person for whom introversion is their safe spot, is the thing that actually fuels them? I know that introverts connect in powerful and deeply meaningful ways, but they don't connect in the ways that a lot of us think about connection. So what's your message to the introverts who are listening today?
Brady, I'm glad you asked the question, because at the end of the day, I think there's a misnomer out there that introverts don't need human connection. I've heard a lot of it since the end of the global pandemic, where people say, I'm an introvert now. I don't need human connection. I'd rather sit at home. And I
Yeah.
think we just need to be cautious about what the description of an introvert is. I know that you might look at me and, the way I show up on a podcast is like, oh my God, let's go get connected. But after this podcast, I'll go and sit by myself for 30 minutes, grab a cup of Joe, and just, kind of calm down from this, because, being your full self can be a challenge at times, and trying to, engage in a virtual conversation is also takes a little extra effort. So I think what we need to understand is that life is about balance, and even introverts need connection. So they need to understand that and find the ways that make it, but no different to make it happen, but no different than what I said earlier. Part of the solution to making introverts feel welcome in a workplace, as an example,
Yep.
is making sure that everybody understands that if that person that you see across, and I can still think of being in the corporate space, the entire finance department were a bunch of introverts. Actually, one guy was not, and he was awesome. But when the extroverts are conscious of that person being an introvert, knowing that they need connection. But when I walked down the aisle and I said, hello, hey, how are you today? How's your day going? Introverts need connection, but they have criteria around it. They don't want to do it in the large group.
Right.
They might want to meet you somewhere for a one-on-one coffee, and
Mm-hmm.
they might want to go to a particular coffee shop that they feel comfortable in, and so they might do it in shorter periods of time. And so if we can help educate all people that there's different types of people, and corporations, by the way, we need to understand who we are overseeing. Because if all we're doing is having the big summer party and the Christmas party, and that's the only two ways that we're engaging our staff in connection throughout the course of the year, imagine how many people are going to miss that sense of connection, community, inclusion, belonging. So now we need to actually work with our staff to better understand them, to say, hey, how do you rock, Brady? What's your type of connection? Are
Yeah.
you okay coming to the Christmas party? Or would you rather do something quieter where we get a group of people together and connect? Because once we understand how we help each individual thrive by themselves, then we can actually figure out the solutions that work for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, my kryptonite, Pete,
Yeah.
is a social gathering where the conversations are this deep and this wide. So banter and talking about stuff that I just want to curl up in a ball. But if I lock in with one or two other people and we go this deep and only this wide, I walk away going, that was a profoundly, I experienced deep human connection at that party. And so, yeah, it's available. Connection is available for our introverts and our extroverts, and making opportunities, I think what you're saying is, and knowing that difference exists, and we've got to create a buffet of ways to connect. Just makes all the sense in the world.
And simply one of the things we do after we do our social health workshops is we survey the staff. What do you want to do now that you understand how important it is? Oftentimes, I think the HR department or the CEO or somebody thinks they've got to be the genius that comes up
Right.
with, what do we need to do? No, just ask the people
Yeah.
now that they understand it. Is it every Friday at 8:30? They'd love to have a little coffee time where everybody could come into a room, whether it's the cafeteria or a local coffee. Hey, we'll meet everybody at 8:30. Is it once a month we're going to do a potluck? Is it, what is it? Because it's not, the rocket science is not in what to do, because we've been doing lots of activities. The rocket science is we need to educate people so that they buy into the why. And then we need to be consistent and authentic in how we build those connections. The CEO can't say I'm all in and never show up.
Yeah.
This is a soup to nuts, top to bottom. We all have to be part of it, because it's not the HR person's responsibility. It's not the CEO's responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility. It's how we interact with each other at all the activities that we put on each day in a workplace.
Yeah. Pete, 2040. You and I are wheeling around in wheelchairs. And you have a vision for the world, but I want to just confine this to Canada, if we could. And I want you to describe, if you are successful in doing what you're doing with GenWell and all of the offshoots that could come out of this, and all of the ways that this starts to really flourish in our country, describe for me a day in the life of Canada, in our elementary schools, in our high schools, in our universities, in our workplaces, in the corporate arena. What are the wild-eyed, crazy-ass dreams that Pete Bombaci has for Canada 15 years from now?
Brady, you could get me emotional with this, and I will tell you that if you asked me this question 3 years ago, I would have still questioned if the vision that I had was actually even possible.
Yeah.
I didn't think people would ever get it. But now, having had the endorsement of the World Health Organization, now that we've become a registered charity in Canada, by the way, 18 months ago, or 2 years ago, when we started that process, the CRA didn't even acknowledge social health as a fundable charity with a purpose to build connection. So, this is the learning curve that has happened
Yeah.
over the course of the last 2 years. So what would I see in 2040? And I hope I'm still in that wheelchair that you drew a great picture of. Is I believe that I would love to see a world where we woke up every morning and took advantage of all the social interactions that are available to us each and every day, whether we did it because we needed it or whether we did it because we recognized that we might change somebody else's day or life through that small interaction. I think the simple thing is, we think of the barista who's built a great relationship with all the people coming through.
Yeah.
I think the pre-pandemic numbers in Canada were that the average Canadian knew one neighbor's name. So, what if we grew that to 5 neighbors? What if we grew, more people talking to strangers? Because right now in Canada, only 20% of Canadians talk to strangers every day. And yet the research tells us that it's nearly 100% of the time, this is US and UK research, that when we talk to a stranger, both people are happy that it happened.
I bet.
And so all the benefits, it isn't as scary as you think. And as Dr. Gillian Sandstrom out of the UK always says, just try it. I'm pretty confident that it's going to go okay. but we need to get people to the point where they understand this. So, I see a world where everybody feels a little more socially connected themselves, and that together we actually feel like we live in a caring, community and society where we recognize we're not all in this alone.
Pete, thank you for doing what you're doing. And
Thanks,
yeah,
Brad.
yeah. And so a listener who at this point just is saying, I want help. What can I do? Pete, point me in the right direction. Where do we find you? What are you doing next? How do my listeners come alongside of what you're doing and support you?
Well, thanks again for the chat, Brady. This is some great questions I haven't had before, so I really appreciate that. But they can check out genwell.ca, whether they need to bring us in to do a workshop in their school, their community, their workplace. We do work in public health. They can find out about the 6 different campaigns we run throughout the course of the year that are our mutual excuse to get connected.
Yeah.
And I'm at Pete at genwellproject.org.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to reach out and have a conversation or a follow up, now as a registered charity, we need support from Canadians more than ever before. And certainly we're looking for corporate partners as well who recognize the opportunity to associate themselves with a movement that's about to change the world. So thanks for letting me share that.
My privilege. Absolutely my privilege. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Pete Bombaci from GenWell, and I hope you find your way to Pete and to the great organization and see how you can help him out. Pete, thank you so much for today.
Thank you so much, Brady.